My name is Amaan Mazhar. I'm the CEO at Modulim, and we are empowering healthcare teams with microvascular imaging and data insights to save lives and to save limbs and improve lives. So before I get started, I'd like for each of you to think about one person who's managing either diabetes or chronic kidney disease in your life. And the reality is they're oftentimes dealing with taking labs and looking at their creatinine levels and their A1C levels. But what's missed is they're really at tremendous risk for getting lower limb ulcers and amputations. They go to their primary care. If they have a good primary care doctor, they'll tell them to look out for a potential wound or ulcer. But the reality is they'll get an ulcer or a wound and they'll show up at a specialist's office. And that's when they're having a very tough conversation about whether to have an amputation or not. The proportion of patients that are at risk for this is staggering. 34% of patients who have diabetes get an ulcer in their lifetime. About a third of diabetes costs is estimated to be related to these hospitalizations, about 80 billion. And then when you look at the total population, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and also those who are pre-diabetic, 61 million patients in the US are at risk. The opportunity is vascular testing at the point of care. We know from all the science and literature that if you have microvascular disease or macrovascular disease, basically compromised circulation due to a chronic condition, you're 22 times more likely to get an ulcer or an amputation. The problem is they're very hard to diagnose. For example, 50% of patients who have macrovascular disease or peripheral arterial disease aren't diagnosed and thought to be missed. And that's where we come in. We've developed a solution that can map the microcirculation in the bottom of the foot. You can see here this is overlaid with a foot that had no wounds, and you have dark spots highlighting areas that are at risk. These are risk areas that are primed for breakdown over time. That data is then uploaded to the cloud after being captured in seconds and transported to a healthcare team that can evaluate it and determine a care plan. In this particular case, a podiatrist would be able to look at this foot and prescribe a foot to protect those areas that are at risk. Similarly, you could do the same thing with a vascular disease patient and get them into advanced vascular care. Why is this important? Every time that we put these specialties in the same roof, under the same roof, people have shown they can decrease amputations, up to 56%. What we're doing is we're connecting with the patient where they are and bringing them under the same digital roof so we can reduce these amputations. The technology follows the patient. The core technology, the heart behind it, is this technology called spatial frequency domain imaging, SFDI. That's what was invented at UC Irvine. And it's able to capture the data in seconds, and it's easy to use and train, and that's where all the IP is generated. From that, we get proprietary biomarkers that have reimbursement and can be used to understand physiology in a number of different use cases. And then we take that data and create clinical insights and are able to then aggregate the data for our customers to do population management. The idea being is they can direct care as they see fit for their healthcare practice. And of course, machine learning and AI is embedded throughout it all. We've been using AI and machine learning to automate findings. The way that we think about that is that machine learning can help improve quality and can help improve scale of our solutions. Most recent advances we've done is to use some image processing to actually make our device smaller and handheld, which I'll talk about lately, and bring the cost of goods down because of all the recent advances. So we keep a pulse on the latest there to make sure that we can scale the technology. So when we look at the market, the challenge with this market is the patients are distributed everywhere. Most patients are at home or in primary care, where basically they're not seeing a specialist. They're showing up with a wound at a later point. There are patients in dialysis clinics who don't see a specialist but are being managed for a chronic disease. And then of course there are patients who are in vascular clinics and podiatric care who are more likely to get this vascular test. So where we focused our attention is to look at the patients who aren't getting care, really to bridge that gap in care access and care equity. That's where the market's about $2.6 billion out of a $3.6 billion TAM. That's an annual recurring revenue based off of our pricing and reimbursement. That's where a large proportion of the limb complications happen for the first time and can be addressed. And that's where the compliance of foot checks are actually very low in a system-wide level. And so when we talk to payer providers and integrated delivery networks, that's where we get the most traction in terms of wanting to deploy this type of solution. And our offering to the customer is a hardware-enabled service. Basically, it can assess the patient at the point of care and connect the team with microvascular insights. So we have our imaging solution that's a hardware tool that empowers the technician to assess the patient. We then have a viewer software that allows someone to look at that data remotely and decide on a care plan. And then we have aggregated data that can be looked at by the chief medical officer to decide on how they want to actually manage their patient population based off of their care plan in their regions. And the pricing ultimately comes down to the deployments in the particular care points and then a per patient per year process. And I'll go over that next. So if you look at a sample IDN, think about a Intermountain or a Kaiser or a VA or anyone in a Medicare Advantage program. When you think about deploying our solution and the utilization that you have, in orange you'll see what the price per patient per year is, $44. With our reimbursement code for our biomarkers, you can see that they can get reimbursed in the fee-for-service world for $75 per patient per year amount. And then if you think about closing care gaps and risk adjustment and also savings from amputations, they can save about $184 per patient per year. So our solution is ideal for someone who's practicing not only fee-for-service, but really the upside is on value-based care. And these are conservative estimates in terms of what you can do, and it actually grows over time as you get people to prevent that primary ulcer. The other benefit for us is when we target customers like this is they're typically managing a lot of patients. So it's all about landing that account and then expanding with that account to be able to get a capitally efficient land and expand commercial model. So here's an example. The system on the left is our FDA cleared cart system. It was used in an outpatient clinic to image a number of feet of patients at risk. You can see visually there's not much wrong with the feet. When you overlay with our microvascular maps, immediately 4 feet pop out. These are then referred to by the specialist depending on the care path they have. And basically you're practicing proactive care. Our clinical collaborators in publications at Arizona, USC, Kaiser Permanente, Fresenius, and Balboa Nephrology have done a lot of pilot and publication work to really validate two things, the operational benefit and the clinical benefit. What we found is operationally, we're not adding any extra time to the workflow, and from a clinical standpoint, we're really identifying that micro and macrovascular disease. The thing that we did learn is these customers want to go further out in the market and make a handheld device. And that's where we are. We're raising $6 million to launch our handheld system. We've got a solid foundation of the clinical data and the science validated. The handheld device will be our own predicate. We have a prototype in place, so we just need to get that through the FDA and then also build on our clinical data that exists. And that will get us to a point where our market launch and be able to raise the next round of financing. The team, I stepped into the CEO role last year. I have 14 years of medical device experience, mainly on the product and clinical side. David Kachia is the CTO, and he's been really spearheading the handheld effort. And then we have a great team of clinical collaborators and KOLs who span the different specialties that manage these patients and really give us some insight on how to move this solution forward. And then I'll just also add that it's a platform technology. We think about meeting the patients where they are. We've got preliminary data in a number of different applications. We got recently funded for $2.5 million by Medtech to do a burn digital assessment tool. And so with the right partner and licensing opportunities, we can do post-market studies with our currently cleared device and get some data in those specific application fields. And then lastly, this isn't just about the limb. The American Heart Association has recognized how big of an issue this is. They've got a call to action to reduce amputations by 20% in 2030. I would go back to the person that asked you to think about at the beginning of the presentation. If anything, maybe reach out to them and let them know that their limbs may be at risk and get checked out. And then we talk about company milestones. One big milestone for me is the person that I think about when I'm building this technology. We were able to image that person and actually get them preventive care, and more importantly, get them more aware and activated about keeping care of that health. And that is a milestone that's really hard to quantify and keeps us going. So with that, if you're interested in joining our journey, please reach out to me, and thank you very much.